Welcome to channel. Today, we explore story filled with unexpected twists. Please, subscribe and like to stay updated. Let's begin. Harvey Wallace was a big landowner, owning a square mile of rocky Pine Peak territory. My father, Gordon Wallace, inherited this acreage and split it evenly between Frank, myself, and my brother, Martin. Martin wasn't interested in the land, so once the estate was resolved, he took a tiny portion of other assets and relocated to Idaho. Martin was reasonable in taking just his fair portion, knowing that the land would not produce money and that I would be liable for the taxes. He did, however, maintain the right to make infrequent visits. The property had two attributes that I cherished. On the western side of the land, a lovely trout stream flowed along the border. The stream started in a large marsh on state territory to the north. Harvey's cabin, constructed after his return from World War II, situated on the eastern side, near the crest of a rocky ridge that stretched north-south across the land. The western slope of this mountain was steep and rough, plunging rapidly into the creek and valley below, where the terrain was covered with hemlock, spruce, and scattered hardwoods. The ridge's crest was desolate, with patches of low scrub and scattered rocks. A pleasant slope stretched eastward for approximately 250 yards before falling into a cliff that plunged a quarter-mile to a disordered rocky region below. Harvey once lost a cart because the wheels were not blocked, and it careened over the edge. Harvey Wallace had rolled and blasted some of the massive rocks lying about, tipping them over the cliff to create way for a home. There was dirt in the fissures and indentations of the granite ledge. Harvey had seen the horrors of war and said that he wanted beauty. He had wandered the woods and placed wildflowers near the cottage. He spent a lot of time on the site, generally alone, until Dad was old enough to join him. Dad was raised by his father when his mother ran off with a salesman when he was 4 years old. I was unsure whether Harvey had ever married. I never seen Dad's birth certificate, so I'm not sure whether he was genuine or not. It didn't matter since Harvey always appeared to have a lady around to look after both his needs and his kid. He would retain a lady until he was sick of her or she was sick of him. This was mutually agreed upon before a lady moved in with him. Harvey, my father informed me, treated all of these ladies nicely. Some remained for years, while others went after a few months. The two I recall were unhappy to depart, but they did as agreed. The one thing that jumped out in all of this was Harvey's skepticism of salespeople. Dad assumed Harvey had a deep affection for his mother. It must have been a guy selling something he did not believe he needed, but she did. The route up to the cabin was steep and winding, with twists and curves that took use of the natural terrain. Harvey maintained it using a two-wheeled dump cart, filling up gullies where water had washed away the gravel. It was drawn by a team of horses. Dad utilized a doodlebug constructed from an old tractor and truck body. I had an ancient army vehicle constructed before automated gearboxes. This was kept in a lean-to on the flat area near the mountain's foot. There was always work to be done on the road in the spring and after a particularly severe storm. We all agreed that preserving access wasn't worth it. But once the road was passable and you sat on the balcony, watching the dawn rise in the east, you forgot what a bother it was. The same grandeur could be seen in the setting sun to the west from the summit of the mountain. The most challenging part for me was that if you were at the cabin, you weren't close enough to fish the stream. If you were fishing in the stream, you had to go a long distance up the mountain to reach the cabin. There was a tiny deer route that began at the creek and wound its way up the other side, but it was a tough journey, and in some spots, you were holding on by your fingernails. Not actually, but it wasn't a trail you wanted to take at night. My family was typical, or so I thought. I was married to Diane, had 2 children, and worked in a feed mill. Diane worked at a real estate firm and thought her career had a bit more class than mine. I had been working at the mill for 22 years and was in charge of a hammer mill that crushed grain. Before being fed to the pellet machine, the grain was first mixed with a variety of additives. We bagged grain for horses and cattle, albeit not as much for cattle as in the past. As the country's population shifted from rural to suburban, little packages of pet food filled the gap. Diane and I enjoyed a 28th anniversary celebration last year, hosted by our 2 daughters. Natalie was 26, while Frank Jr. was 24. I suppose you could say Natalie was mine, and Diane owned Frank Jr. I had expected our first kid to be a male, but within a few days of her arrival, I changed my mind and welcomed the small little girl into my life. The kid came 2 years later, but I was unable to convey Natalie's adoration to Frank Jr. My mistake, I admit, and maybe I didn't have enough love for both. He didn't lack for affection, and Diane compensated by smothering him. Don't get me wrong, I did not ignore him. I played catch with him and attended all of his school events. But at home, he relied on his mother for affection. When I went Frank Jr. fishing, which was my love, he refused to put a worm on the hook. When he was older and I suggested we go hunting, his mother spoke up for him and claimed it was too hazardous. What about Natalie? Natalie shot an 8-point deer 2 days after she turned 15. She even got her photo in the newspaper. I got the photo enlarged up to a 2 by 4 foot framed image to display in her room as a Christmas gift. Similarly, the two children matured differently. Natalie was tall and athletic, just like me. Frank Jr. was small and chubby. I assumed this was due to the chocolates his mother had given him. He was brilliant, too, with an extensive vocabulary and a passion for arithmetic. Two diverse persons with disparate interests. Maybe a bit strange, but the two youngsters got along well together. Diane and I got along well until Frank Jr. and Natalie were old enough to care for themselves. Diane then returned to work. She attended a real estate refresher course, and we gradually drifted apart. She spent several nights seeing properties. She assumed she was little better than me. I would say that she maintained herself looking good. Maybe she didn't appeal to every male, but some did take a second look. I think it was because her coworkers dressed nicer for work than I did. I'd put on nice clothes and take her out on Friday night or Saturday, maybe both. We generally returned home feeling upbeat. As we entered our 40s, things slowed, as they often do, and once a week sufficed for me. Diane never appeared to demand anything more, so I figured she was okay with it. Our lives developed such that I would return home from the mill, take a shower, and begin cooking the evening meal. If Diane didn't have a property to show after dinner, she would generally call some of her friends and gab for hours. I performed yard work or messed about in the garage doing some woodwork. Natalie often joined me, and we had a flowing discussion about whatever had piqued our attention over the day. She and I were still out fishing when our schedules coincided. I had pals. One was Warren Douglas. He was almost 72 and had been my father's companion throughout the Korean War. When I was younger, I was often fishing with Dad, and Natalie joined us as she grew older. He resided just west of our land, along the creek. Warren, Natalie, and I often roamed about my property, even up on the high slopes. We uncovered a large elderly black bear's lair and watched her play and educate her youngster. The bear stuck around for years. I haven't seen her for at least 5 seasons. Maybe a hunter shot her. Elliot and Rachel Hansen, a brother and sister who ran a detective firm, were also among my buddies. Both had partners. Elliot married a lady called Melanie, and Rachel was married, sort of. She had a lifelong companion named Lena. Elliot was a modest, unassuming guy, and Lena resembled him, thus they often collaborated. Rachel was a stunning redhead with a goddess physique to match. She seldom left the office on a case since she was easy to recognize and recall. Melanie, Elliot's wife, and I used to be in the same class. Rachel was a year behind us, and we dated often. This wasn't until she met Lena. Elliot had decided to work for a detective agency. When the owner retired, he sold the business to Elliot, Rachel, and Lena Hansen. When I had time off and Diane or the kids were not around, I would pop over and visit with Rachel and whatever else was in the office. Did I ever believe I'd need the help of my friends? Unlikely, but who knows? Diane and I had our separate lifestyles and groups of friends. Her pals were work-related, but mine were from when I was younger. It seems that once I met a buddy, we would be friends for life. Have I ever doubted her? Not really, but given the circumstances, I knew it was possible. I didn't think of any other lady but Diane. I recalled my granddad and how readily ladies moved through his life. There was always some grief in there someplace. I did not desire it for myself. When Natalie was 26, she was living in her own apartment, while Frank Jr. had moved in with a friend. Diane and I sent our federal tax paperwork on February 4th. The reimbursement arrived on March 30th. We sat about talking about what we would do with the money. We decided to trade in our 6-year-old Chevrolet and purchase a smaller vehicle for Diane to drive to work. My vehicle was newer, thus it was not regarded as a trade-in. With the Chevrolet and the rebate, we would only have to borrow $6,000 for the model we chose, which was well within our budget. We headed over to the Toyota store and walked around. All of the automobiles were arranged according to pricing. What we were searching for was at the far end of the property. Diane, could you go inside and locate a salesman? I believe this is what we desire. I waited a long time before I began searching for Diane. When she didn't return, I located her in a Lexus RX 350 in the front of the parking lot. The salesperson hopped down, leaving Diane in the SUV. Frank, this is the vehicle I want. It's huge and lovely. Alex says we can swing it. Hello, my name is Alex Nolan. I've been communicating with your wife. Look, this is your fortunate day, friend. We'll offer you $2,500 off if you take a test drive in this vehicle. Even if you don't purchase it today, you'll still save $2,500 when you do. No, it's much too much. We cannot afford it. Do the test drive anyhow. You never know. It's like cash in the bank. No. How about your wife? Let her go. She is the one who will be driving it. I glanced at Diane. She really wanted to drive that machine. There was no possibility we would ever purchase it, but I replied, go ahead. They'll wait in the Chevrolet. Thank you, Frank. I observed from my automobile as the salesperson guided Diane through the Caddy's functioning. She drove gently out of the lot, with the salesperson close behind her. After they had been gone for half an hour, I grew apprehensive and nervous. It took them more than an hour to return. I was angry. I virtually dragged my wife from the vehicle. Diane's cheeks was flushed. Frank, we need to purchase this. It's fantastic. I looked at Alex. His face was flushed, and he was sweating lightly. No. It's much too much. Christ, that must be $47,000. A little more. This one sells for $68,190. No, Diane. We're heading home. We will get along with the Chevrolet. Diane would not talk and pouted until we got home. She crashed into the home. I ordered dinner and ate alone. As I lay in bed next to my cold wife, the notion occurred to me that Turner was attempting to sell my wife more than a car, and I shivered at the thought. Maybe he was purchasing instead. They had been gone much too long. He must have realized there would be no sale on the automobile. The notion lingered, and I couldn't get it out of my head. I stopped in to visit Rachel Hansen. She could sense that something was bothering me. Rachel was more than just a friend. I was the first to sleep with her, back in high school. I was also the one who spoke to her and comforted her when she felt torn about her desire to women. She worried until I suggested that she at least investigate the proclivity. It took a while, but as a young police officer, she eventually discovered Lena. So, Frank, don't you mind if one of us checked into Alex Nolan? I'm interested what your wife was doing during that hour. We won't know until he brags, but we can learn a little about him. It seems like a lot to ask. Not too busy, and we need to keep our hand in. This elicited laughter, since the Hansen agency was regarded as the best and most efficient. I contacted Rachel later, informing her Diane claimed Turner had called and was ready to sell us whatever we wanted to purchase. I was worried since my wife didn't look me in the eye when she told me this. Terry interjected, why don't we go ahead and tap your phone? Then you'll know if he calls again and what they say. Okay, Terry, but is this legal? It is if you employ us. You are the registered homeowner. Okay, go for it. Do I need to do anything? No, but be careful what you say to your girlfriend. This resulted in another chuckle. I heard nothing else. It was a hectic period for me. I had to start the army vehicle so I could rebuild the road to the chalet. I should have had a tractor with a bucket, but I loved that old vehicle, and shoveling gravel on and off kept me fit. Martin and his family were coming after school to have a mini vacation on the mountain. For days up there, and 3 in town with pals should be plenty to do all he desired. The Hansen agency's proposal had escaped my memory. I had been busy on the road. I discovered it in the worst condition it has been in years. I had a lot of little holes and gullies to fill. Unfortunately, after I loaded some gravel into the truck, I had to reverse up the road and unload. I had a mile of stuff, so it took 3 weekends. When May arrived, I worked a few nights. I finished it by Memorial Day and told Diane I never wanted to do it again, and I didn't want to go up there myself. This year's holidays were mixed. I had to work on the Friday before the holiday, while Diane was off. She had to work on Monday, and I had the day off. I had a lot of comp time saved up, so I used Friday to give myself 5 days instead of 3. I didn't say anything because I intended to fish my heart out. All of the pools would be deep and dark, with fresh water, thus early in the season. It hadn't rained in a week, so those rainbows should be hungry. The road I was repairing to the cabin came in from town on the east end of the property. The road to the stream was farther north and came in from the west, some miles distant. Friday morning was an ideal day for fishing. It was overcast, and it seemed to be about to rain. I went to the grocery shop and purchased a pound of salt pork to cook my fish in. I stopped by Warren's for a can of worms, promising to return before noon with fish. No, I won't be here. Going to town to see the parade. They'll be back about 4 in the afternoon. I can eat fish anytime on my own. I went to the property and parked my pickup. I had caught nothing in the first 2 holes, and I was becoming disappointed. A half-mile down the creek, I saw a lovely rainbow. After a lengthy open stretch, I returned to the trees and struck the motherlode. 5 more beauties responded to bait, the greatest ID ever caught, and were soon flopping about in my basket. I sat down and opened my bag. Natalie had taken my mess kit a few weeks back while out fishing and had not returned it. The distance back to my pickup was 1 mile. It was barely a quarter mile to where the deer track began at the creek and finished near the cottage. It was quite steep, but I could do it. The skillets were the most accessible in the cabin. I went up the route and encountered one hurdle after another. There were numerous fallen trees across the route. Coming down the path, the deer could easily leap them, but going up, I had to crawl out and around them. I stopped to take in the vista after reaching the high point behind the cabin. I peered down at the cabin and saw a car partly camouflaged on the far side nearer the road. Damn, I was hoping I wouldn't have to share my fish. I lowered down and approached the structure from back, where I could hear sounds coming from within. When I approached the front, I recognized who it was. Diane's Lexus RX 350 with dealer plates was parked in front, having had a test drive months previously. I understood exactly what was going on based on the noises coming from inside the cabin. I recognized her voice, begging whomever was screwing her to keep going and not give up. Hell, I'd heard her speak these things enough times over the previous 25 years. I paused to assess the situation. The truck was directed directly toward the precipice 150 yards away. A pair of men's dress shoes were on the balcony right outside the entrance. I stepped up and glanced into the vehicle. Diane's shoes were on the floor in front, and her underpants were curled up on the seat. There were 2 cell phones on the dashboard. I contemplated how to get even. Did I want them to drive over the cliff in their bright new Caddy? Diane was rapidly approaching a climax within the cottage. Maybe I should hurt her and whomever was with her. I took his shoes from the deck and placed them in the front seat. I collected Diane's shoes and panties and placed them in my rucksack. I found a baseball-sized stone and put it under the rear tire as a chalk. I reached in, shifted the gear selector to neutral, and released the brake. I knew where Diane was. She was about 2 minutes from what sounded like a spectacular summit. I kicked the stone aside and watched as the large, glossy new XT5 gained pace. I wondered whether it would accelerate enough to fly. No, I do not think so. I didn't hear it go down the edge. I was nearly at the top of the slope behind the cottage when I heard it smash far below me. I was certain that the sound was too far away to interfere with Diane's perception of what was going on. I turned and started down the deer track. I could have been at the cabin for 15 minutes, but I doubt it. I decided to wait for Warren to return from the parade in town. I didn't need to wait. He was at home. You know full well I'm not much for parades. I expected you to come over with a couple of fish. It took you long enough. I have fish, and if anybody asks, I've been here since before midday. Can you do that? Sure. What have you been up to, boy? Don't know if I should tell you. You sound like it must be funny the way you're grinning. It is, sort of. I attempted to make a $68,000 caddy fly. Did not work. Give me why and what for. I sat down and discussed everything I knew and suspected. I knew Diane was deceiving me, and I assumed it was with a salesperson called Alex Nolan. He was going to have a lot of explaining to do when he returned to the dealership. Diane and the a-hole were going to have aching feet, too. They had to go 3 kilometers before they could locate a phone. The gravel I had just finished pouring down on most of the route was going to eat their feet to pieces. What are your next steps? Warren inquired. Eat fish and get drunk. Is it an order? I've got the fish and salt pork to cook. I hope you receive the beer. Sounds like a fair trade. I was awake enough around midnight to hear Warren on the phone. Natalie wants to talk with you. She's having a difficult trouble finding you. Are you sober enough to speak to her? Natalie? What does she want? I don't know. Hello, child. What's up? Pop, I had a terrible time finding you. Mom is in the hospital. What happened? Is she all right? She will be. She sliced both feet while going barefoot. She'll have to be off them for a few days. That doesn't sound like your mother. I understand. She would not offer me any information. She wants you to place a single bed in the spare room downstairs. The ambulance will take her home at noon. I will come by and make it up. You sound like you are still inebriated. You sober up before attempting to drive. Sure. There goes the holiday. Pop, I understand. Honey, make coffee and drink it black. They'll get a few more hours of sleep and then come home. Natalie and I were prepared for Diane when she came in the ambulance. Frank Jr. was with her and planned to spend the weekend. That was kind of him, but I believed he was there to prevent me from asking too many questions about his mother. That was okay. I was not going to confront her with both kids there. I needed to visit Rachel Hansen anyhow. Before I did that, she phoned twice on Thursday, claiming she had some Turner reports and something I should know about Diane. I had put off Rachel and gone fishing instead. To maintain the illusion of a happy, loving family, I continued saying how great it was to have everyone home for the holidays, exactly as it was before the kids went away. I nearly made myself ill with my desire to please Diane. I was so kind that the kids had had enough by Sunday evening and left me in charge of looking after her. She pushed the kids, particularly Frank Jr., to remain, but they wanted one day of the holiday to themselves. Pop takes such wonderful care of you. There is no reason for us to remain. Diane beckoned for me to join her as soon as they departed. You haven't asked me what occurred. Are you not interested? Of course I am intrigued. I'm also intrigued by the fact that Alex Nolan arrived at the hospital with feet in similar form to yours. I believe you have some answers. It's just that I'm not sure what questions to ask, and if you respond, can I trust that you're giving me the truth? Of course, you can ask anything. Just one question tonight. Were you trying to take advantage of him? No. How can you think like that? I know when you find out where I was, you may doubt me, but I wasn't doing him. Diane, I do not believe you. I know I can't prove you screwed him, but I no longer trust you, which is just as awful. I am going to bed. Sweet dreams. Diane was calling after me as I walked up to our bedroom. Diane looked terrible when I arrived downstairs in the morning. She was extremely somber, and when I attended to her needs, she didn't say anything. Some of the more intimate things I did embarrassed her, and she responded with a murmured thank you. Diane, I'll see if I can get a wheelchair for you. At the very least, you can move about downstairs. We may even figure out how you move from the chair to the toilet. They'll be gone a few hours. Is there anything I could buy you? They'll come returning to buy lunch for us. She called me back as I was approaching the front door. I adore you, Frank. They'll get you to trust me again. It would be good. We've been together for a long time. They'll be back shortly. I went over to Rachel's place. She and Lena were in their garden cooking a barbecue. Hello, Rachel. You said you had something for me. Yes, but not today. It's a holiday, you know. I heard your wife was having difficulties with her feet. Will she be okay? Yes, eventually. Can I steal a beer? I could use one. Lena opened one and gave it to me, saying, Hell, Rachel. Tell him. He needs to know. It's not easy informing a buddy that his wife is cheating on him. Give me the highlights, anyhow. I don't need information. The devil is in the details. First and foremost, Turner is not the only one who is cheating on your wife. One of the other real estate salespeople meets at Budget Inn for lunch once a week. According to the person at the counter, they come in on Tuesdays and remain for 2 hours. He's constantly anxious about getting into problems for renting a room for a short period of time, so he charges for the whole day. I don't have any images other than them going in and out. Turner, I have additional information about him. He's been to your home multiple times, and twice they were in the bedroom where we keep the camera. You can guess the rest. Their phone sex made me blush. I have created transcripts of some of the items that, if heard by a court, would tip the scales in your favor. What are you planning to do? Nothing till my brother and his family return from Idaho and depart again. He doesn't have to know about this. She may still keep doing this to you. Cannot be helped. That's how I want it. Can't get much worse than what she's already done. They'll simply maintain a lid on everything. Different subject. May I use your father's wheelchair, assuming you still have it? Certainly. You may keep it. I will grab it. It is in the basement. Come into the office after work, and I'll give you the information I have on Diane. We haven't spent much attention on this. Your wife is a creature of habit. If she accomplished one thing this week, all we had to do was be in position, and she would come up the following day with the same person in the same place, unless she meets someone else. There's that. She can also do it fairly rapidly. Just to let you in on something they've discussed multiple times and believe is a huge joke. It goes like this. The day she went for the test drive, she was anxious to drive the XT5 but apprehensive about scratching it. Turner saw this, and as she focused on keeping the car on the road, he reached down and stroked his hand up her leg, under her skirt. He easily captivated her, and they got so close that she had to pull over alongside the road to collect her thoughts. I feel that was the turning point in your relationship. She gave him a BJ in the vehicle and just by the roadside. She was thankful for how he made her feel, and their relationship became stronger from there. He even returned home with her panties in his pocket. I suppose you're not doing your job, Frank, since she's seeing both him and her other boyfriend. How often has she seen Turner? At least twice every week. It is documented that she reserves Saturday night for you, which is really nice of her. Thank you, Rachel. That's enough for now. They'll come back for the remainder later. Frank, please return and join us for the barbecue this afternoon. Lena's relative will be present. You may as well start looking around. Should be a good place to start. Diane was upset because I had stayed longer than the 2 hours. Where have you been? I assumed you'd be right back. Is this the wheelchair? Am expected to get into it? It seems to be 100 years old. Perhaps it is. It was the only one I could locate on a holiday. Let's see whether you can get in and out of the restroom. I need to work tomorrow. I took Friday off to go fishing. Yes, and I also ended up falling down intoxicated. I needed you when I was hurt. You could have called. I can't. Oh, that's correct. Your phone was in the XT5 that fell over the cliff above the cabin. How did you learn about the accident? Come on, the whole town knows. Natalie understands. Frank Jr. isn't saying anything, but he must have heard that his mother had to travel miles barefoot with a shady auto salesperson as company. A salesperson who neglected to put the brakes on a $68,000 automobile he was attempting to sell to a married lady who does not have enough money to purchase one. Oh, no. Just where were your shoes, anyway? That's a large car. Were you two playing when it began rolling? No, not like that. It was hot, and we had taken our shoes off. We had the back open and were swinging our feet to cool down. In 5 minutes, we were thinking about returning to town. We heard a crack as the vehicle lurched forward. We leaped out, but all we could do was watch it roll down and over the cliff. Good luck to you. At the very least, he will not come sniffing about you again, not after you have cost him such an expensive automobile. You make it sound like I was having an affair with him. I was not. If you say so, my dear. What would you want for lunch? I won't be eating since I've been asked to a barbecue this afternoon. Would you want to travel with me? Just a heads up. If you do, you may be asked some questions. A tuna sandwich, I suppose. Cannot you remain with me? Do you want more questions from me? No, go. Diane must have realized she was losing me as I walked out the door. I could have calmed her concerns, but whatever the outcome, she only had herself to blame. I arrived to the barbecue at the same time as Lena's cousin, Sylvia Hayes. I had met her previously, but I was already married at the time. I was still married, but it was no longer as secure. I knew she had an organic farm farther up the valley. She also owned 3 greenhouses where she produced flowers for sale at local markets. Sylvia was a widow. Her husband had died a few years previously. Sylvia was lovely in a willow-whip kind of manner, tall and angular. She moved with effortless elegance. She had probably never won a beauty contest, unless it was Miss Congeniality. I said hello, and we walked into the backyard. We ended up sitting together in the afternoon. We didn't try to impress one another, and we ended up having a lot in common. She didn't express it, but she enjoyed how I handled her cousin and Rachel. When we spoke about other persons we may know, the skies opened, and it seemed like a fact had arrived on a sunbeam. I mentioned Warren Douglas, a friend and former Army comrade of my father's. She knew him well and sometimes paid him a visit. She never had much time to fish with him since she was bound to the farm, but she managed to do it 3 or 4 times every year. I replied I had a drink with him last week. She giggled and said that she had done the same thing when she was upset over losing her spouse. I'll admit that I was drawn to this lady now that I was free to think about someone other than Diane. Before I left the barbecue, Sylvia encouraged me to visit her farm and observe how things worked. She said that she needed to recruit more people and that if I was interested, I seemed to be someone she would want to hire. It would be a significant departure from the feed mill, but if the money was comparable to what I was receiving, I may consider it. When I got home, I felt bad for having such a great time, so I was as kind to my wife as I could. Diane positioned her wheelchair next to my chair as we watched television in the evening. We genuinely held hands. I was extremely cautious not to confront her about anything that occurred last week. I still hope to get through my brother's visit in 3 weeks. Tuesday morning, I made one harmless comment, but if Diane was guilty, it would cause her to pause and ponder. I'm headed to work. Do you want me to stop by your office and inform everyone that you are unable to attend any planned meetings? If you have any midday appointments, I could come home and drive you, but they would have to bring you back if it went more than an hour. That's no, Frank. I will phone the office. I'm sure, based on what you've mentioned, they'll be aware of my incident and not expect me. Thanks anyway. It took Diane 3 weeks to recover sufficiently to return to work. My brother phoned to say he wasn't waiting for school to get out. He was bringing a buddy, Derek, rather than his family. He vowed to come back with his family in the autumn and spend more time with me. When he arrived, he questioned about the cabin and if it was still livable. I claimed it was, and the road was also drivable. He and Derek planned to spend their 3 days exploring around the woods, not fishing, which neither of them enjoyed. I hadn't seen them for 2 days, so I drove up to the cabin to check how they were doing. I now understood why he arrived when he did. After an hour of shooting the bull with Greg, Derek made me an offer on the property. Greg had informed him that I would never sell the stream and part of the surrounding land, but that I may let the rest go because the taxes were too high. Derek believed it would be ideal for paintball wars, something he enjoyed. He was seeking for somewhere to lay up a course across challenging terrain. This place was just what he was looking for. I cautioned him that he would have problems obtaining permissions. This did not bother him at all. They'll consider your offer, but I won't make any commitments. This was my grandfather's property, but you are aware of that. I know that. I will tell you what. Cut aside 60 acres and have them surveyed where the stream borders the land, and he'll pay you $750,000 for the rest. That offers me the whole mountain, road, and cottage. You'll still have the stream and at least a 500-foot strip on the west side that isn't too steep. I'm glad Warren taught me how to play poker. I kept my face motionless. Don't know because I want to sell. It has been in the family for almost 100 years. I have 2 children, and I want to leave them anything. We haggled for 2 hours. I accepted an offer of $850,000. I gave up on the idea that he would have restricted access over my land, which included the creek. Greg subsequently took me aside and informed me that he expected me to accept for $800,000 as a price, and that I did really well to secure the larger amount. I had a problem as well. I wanted $1 for an option, and he could pick it up at any moment following my impending divorce from my wife, Diane Wallace. I did not want my wife to know about the deal. All of this was new to Greg. I thought this was acceptable, given that the buyer was not going to do anything for a year. To counter this, I said that I would maintain the road Jeep accessible until July of next year. Fine. After July of the next year, Derek planned to develop a genuine road as well as other structures and stands. We drove into town and had a lawyer draft out the paperwork, which we both signed in front of witnesses to make it a legally binding contract. The following day, Greg and his companion left. Now it was time to deal with Diane. I hadn't begun the processes yet, but I had everything in order. It was July 5th, and I brought up the matter with my wife over dinner. Diane, I am informing you that I am seeking a divorce. She took it nicely. She must have anticipated that I would eventually find out about her infidelity. Why? You've been unfaithful. Not only that, but even when you were in risk of being discovered, you continued to cheat on me, and not just with me. You had intercourse with 2 separate guys inside the previous week. Do you have evidence for this? Of sure, or we wouldn't be having this talk, right? Would you tell me all you know? I haven't seen the photos on the tapes created by the camera that is positioned in our bedroom. The home phone has been tapped since May. Everything you've spoken has been recorded. This information was collected by a professional investigator. Just tell me one thing for sure that you have a record of. I suppose the one thing that upset me the most and prompted me to seek a divorce was the chat you often had on the phone with your boyfriend. You had a memorable experience on the test drive with him. Remember how I waited for nearly an hour for you to return? I'm sure you didn't think about me once throughout your relationship with him. This was simply too disrespectful on your part. She realized she couldn't justify her behavior. You mentioned 2 men? The man you see every Tuesday at the Budget Inn. The only Tuesday you skipped was the one when I volunteered to transport you to him. Diane seemed resigned, waiting to see what I would do. You seem to know everything. What happens next? I would like a peaceful divorce based on irreconcilable differences. I don't want to share this with Natalie or Frank Jr. We both need to create a living for ourselves, and we're nearly 47. When we start afresh, we need something. If we fight, the lawyers will take a sizable chunk of what we have. So we distribute what we have. How? Except for the cabin property, which is located straight down the center. This includes the home and all of our valuables. You get the Chevy, and I keep my truck. That's being really fair. I'm not sure whether I anticipated that much. They'll take it, however. You're treating me quite well. Better than I deserved. I imagine the cabin will go to Natalie someday, and after what happened up there, it is nothing I want a part of. She seemed to contemplate something. How much will we tell the kids, and how? I don't see the point in making confessions. Let's simply tell them we've fallen out of love and are getting divorced. The judicial record will bear this out. Saturday night, we'll have them over for supper and inform them. Do you want me to move out? Isn't there any need? For the last 3 months, I've lived in the same home as you while you were cheating. I don't mind waiting a bit longer. Separate bedrooms, however. I'm sure it won't upset you, and I can manage without sex given the circumstances. I may go up and live with Warren Douglas. I can go fishing whenever I want from there. Okay, then I'll move back into the room down here where I stayed when I hurt my feet. You might give me an idea why you did this to me. I'm bored with you. When the kids moved out, we settled into a rhythm in which you either worked or went fishing. I worked, and there was nothing to do around the home. We went out once a week, had a few drinks, and then returned home. You'd roll on me, and we'd be asleep within 15 minutes. I decided I wanted more. You could have discussed this with me. To be honest, Frank, I have no regrets. I've had some wonderful moments. Sorry about it, and sorry you caught me. Time to put an end to this marriage, I guess. You're fortunate that I'm not a violent guy. I could still decide to get even, but it won't be violent. I never worried about you that way. Okay, but people change. As I said, you were fortunate. I haven't changed that much. It has been close, though, and you may never know how close. The divorce took 150 days to become official. Much has transpired during that period. Sylvia Hayes and I started seeing one other. She recruited me to assist build up a hydroponic system in one of her greenhouses as an experiment. She had secured an agricultural grant, and at the time she hired me, I had not sold the land. In truth, she was unaware of the upcoming transaction. We intended to have some tiny veggies by Christmas, starting with radishes and baby carrots, lettuce, and summer squashes before moving on to other crops. Tomatoes were on schedule to be ripe for Valentine's Day. There had been multiple reports in the media regarding what she was preparing. We had folks who were eagerly awaiting the first product. Diane wanted to keep the home, so she bought me out. I had relocated north barely a week after filing for divorce and was staying with Warren while traveling the 3 miles to Sylvia's house. He was quickly fading, and he kept pestering me to propose to Sylvia because he wanted to be the one to escort her down the aisle. I proposed, and as soon as the final decree arrived, we were married. Greg and Derek arrived there the day my divorce was finalized, and we swapped paperwork. He got a deed, and I received a check, which I believe was a fair deal. I accepted the money and persuaded Sylvia that she needed a business partner as well as a spouse. I never spoke much about my divorce with anybody. Rachel and the Hansen agency were aware, of course. I never asked Lena whether she shared her expertise with Sylvia. Diane, I put our former lives behind me. Natalie and Frank Jr. attempted to convince their mother and me to remain together. Diane was a major help in persuading them that divorce was the best option for us, but she never explained why the breakdown happened. She understood it was pointless to attempt to mend a shattered marriage. Natalie and Frank Jr. eventually met Sylvia, and seeing how happy I was with her, they were thrilled for me. Warren had survived long enough to accompany Sylvia down the aisle, where I waited for her. When we returned to see him 3 months later on a Sunday afternoon, he was almost comatose. He became alert enough to recognize us. He died the next day. It was a large funeral, and the church was packed with friends despite the fact that he had no family. Diane turned her life around and abandoned Turner when he was unable to find work. I learned from Rachel that she had also canceled her Tuesday date. I didn't know anything about the affair, and I wasn't even inquisitive enough to find out his name. I didn't care, and I didn't see Diane very much when she departed and relocated 47 miles south to work for another real estate firm. I sometimes saw her at Natalie's or Frank Jr.'s. We arrived as old acquaintances without revealing our history or our years together. Natalie married when I was 49 years old, and I gave her away. I assured her that she could have whatever kind of wedding she wanted. The one she chose was sensible. Diane and I worked together well enough to avoid conflict, and Natalie had a great ceremony. Natalie's husband worked for the state as a forester, and they met when Derek was having his new property inspected for environmental permits. She was fishing and, intrigued, started up a discussion with him when he came across the stream. Frank Jr. seems to constantly have a lady on his arm, a new one each time I saw him. They didn't remain with him long, and I was curious whether Diane had anything to do with it. I hope when he chose one, it would be a lady more like Sylvia than his mother. Frank Jr. and Sylvia became friends, and he often came to visit us. Diane was visiting Frank Jr. one day that year, and they went out to get some tomatoes and lettuce. We behaved like a father and son who respected one another and became closer as time passed. Sylvia advised we hire him as our accountant. Our company was expanding every year, and we would soon need one full-time accountant. I grasped the opportunity. ID always wanted Diane to know one thing, and now felt like the right moment to tell her. Diane, could you just wait here while I grab something from the garage? Frank Jr. will spend some time in the greenhouse with Sylvia. My ex-wife was perplexed. I returned with a shoebox covered in duct tape. I opened it and gave it to Diane. Do you know whose they are? She examined the pair of shoes. She flipped the sneakers over with her hands. They look like the ones I used to wear. She didn't see the undergarments below the shoes at first. When she did and saw the underwear, she was horrified because she knew them. You were at the cabin that day, right? You should have known all along. You must have overheard Alex and me. Didn't the XT5 just get free and roll away? Did you send the caddy over the cliff? Yes. I was fishing and came up the back to cook my catch. You and Turner were in the cabin, and his shoes were on the deck. I removed his shoes and placed them in the vehicle. I nearly went in and hit him over the head with a piece of wood. I could have put him into the vehicle, complete with his shoes. Then I considered killing you to cover it up. With a little effort, I believe I could have made it work. They got away with it. I think the notion was that Natalie and Frank Jr. would be the ones most affected by the controversy. He did not die because of you, nor did you die because of them. I simply wanted you to know how close to death you were on that day. I prepared additional things for you over time, staying up at night thinking of other ways to embarrass and hurt you. I considered numerous ways to turn Natalie and, particularly, Frank Jr. against you. But why should they bear the consequences of your infidelity? Diane, I suppose you finally received a free pass. I'm pleased I didn't let my hatred for you drive me to do some of these things. I found a great lady, and I now care for her more than I ever did for you. You continue to prey on my mind at times, but now that you have your shoes back, I believe I can let go of you and go on with my life. Frank, why did you tell me this when returning the shoes? It makes me feel more guilty than before. The blame now rests solely with you, since I have forgiven and gone on. If we all receive one free pass, know that you've used it and go on. Frank Jr. arrived with a bunch of tomatoes. My wife followed him. He glanced at his mother, who stood near me. Are you all right, Mom? You have a strange appearance. Yes, I am fine. Your father and I were just reminiscing. I've come to realize that he's a greater guy than I ever gave him credit for. Are you prepared to go? Sylvia, it was good to see you again. Take care. Diane was gripping the package containing her shoes as she and Frank Jr. climbed into his vehicle. What happened between you and Diane? Sylvia inquired after they'd gone. What was inside the package she held? I've never seen that before. There was just one pair of shoes. I discovered these and preserved them for a day like today. I was furious and wanted to inflict her a lot of suffering since she needed them and didn't have them. I'd say it was really painful at the moment. I was in anguish the day I took them, and I knew it was the end of my marriage to Diane. She traveled from the cottage back to society, cutting her feet to bits. That was bodily anguish for one of us, and emotional torment for me. I had the shoes and intended to cause her additional misery, but within a week, I met you at Rachel's cookout. I considered if you would have approved of what I meant. I decided you wouldn't, so I packed them up and moved on with my life. I handed them back to her today. That is the final link to the marriage I had with her. We've got some spare time. What would you want to do? Before I answer that, have you heard from Natalie recently? I bet I can guess whether you have or not. Bet you can't. I'm betting she's at Warren's old home and wants to go fishing. I spotted some salt pork on the sideboard in the kitchen. Who would have expected Warren to relinquish his post to her? I was not surprised. Despite the fact that they were not related, he adored her as a grandpa would. I believe she enjoyed going fishing with him as much as she did with me. That may explain why she usually catches more than I do. I think he taught her more than I'll ever know. He taught me too. I know you noticed that I always prepare the fish. Nobody can cook them better than me. He taught me that. Natalie had phoned and was at Warren's apartment. She stated she wanted to go fishing before she grew too big. So we went fishing. I had to keep practicing since it seemed like I'd have a new little one to educate in a few years. Thank you for staying with this wonderful tale of betrayal, redemption, and second chances. What would you have done in Frank's shoes? Please share your opinions in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for future tales.